Up my Big 12 series for this week, it felt fitting for me to talk about Oklahoma State. They, at least for me, they've been one of the biggest disappointments this year. I would argue even bigger than Utah. And for those you don't know, I've talked about Utah a number of times on this program. I did a preview with them. I talked about Kyle Whittingham, and also I just talked about the holy war game that they had versus BYU. So I've been in the loop with Big 12 football and all of that. But Oklahoma State's one of those teams where, they're just so consistent. And also, I love Mike Gundy too. I mean, you can talk about, some of the controversial things he says, or, he's just a blue collar guy. And that's one thing that you admire about him, is that he wears his heart in his sleeve. And you can just tell that he's so passionate about this program, even when you go all the way back to, him being a quarterback in the late 80s, early 90s. And at one point, he had the college football record for most passing attempts without an interception until RG3 broke that back in 2011 or 2012, ironically against Oklahoma State too, which is another fun fact. But going into this year, they had so much success, going to 2023. They had 10 plus wins, a Big 12 championship appearance. So like a lot of things were going in that direction, and they returned a number of offensive starters, a lot of defensive starters. You have Ollie Gordon, who, was in the running for the Walker Trophy too. And when you combine all that together, you have to think to yourself, man, Oklahoma State's in a really good opportunity to make a run at this, even with Utah, being in the picture too, and everything, all things considered. But right now they're 3-7. They're 3-7 right now, and everything that you can imagine going wrong is going wrong for them. Now at this point, obviously the 18 season bowl record is obviously over now. Now Mike Gundy's been head coach there 20 seasons, and he's had so much success, and he is one of those guys that no matter what, he has a spot there forever in my opinion. But what fascinated me about talking about this program this evening was I kind of asked myself, where does Oklahoma State go from here? Because I was doing some research before this episode and everything, and all things considered, Oklahoma State didn't do too much in the transfer portal. They brought in maybe 10 or so guys, majority of them 3-star recruits from, upper, G5 schools who probably didn't get as much playing time. And, obviously certain players are going to leave too due to playing time or getting money from another school, or, whatever it is, fill in the blank too. So it seems like the Oklahoma State has tried to put some resources there. But at the same time, when you have such a strong foundation for the program and everything you had going on, you have to ask yourself, like what went wrong with this team? Because all things considered, everything's there. And I guess we can even talk about some of the play calling and the coordinators, particularly Casey Dunn, who who's with Oklahoma State now calling plays. And, I was watching the game versus Arizona State this weekend. One of the things I asked myself was, when Oklahoma State was at the 4-yard line, and, why you're calling four straight passing plays when you have a quarterback and Alec Bowman who struggled this year. I would, he's thrown eight interceptions straight in games. Other than the South Dakota State game at the very beginning of the season, he's thrown at least one interception for the past 8 games. And although he's experienced, he's a redshirt senior. His career dates back all the way to 2018. So at this point, he is a 6th-year senior. Yeah, I never thought I would be saying that even 5 or 6 years ago, yet alone now. So that's still kind of messing with my brain a little bit. But you have to ask yourself too, is Oklahoma State ever going to be able to make adjustments? Because yes, the success is there, statistically speaking, between your 20 plus seasons, making bowl games 19 out of 20, and for the most part, never really have a losing record. So that's something also that often gets swept under the rug, much like Mike Tomlin too. For those past couple seasons, for those of you who watch NFL, he kind of had that same sort of story too. Outside of that Super Bowl appearance or two, he was kind of just like middling in that sort of 8 to 10 win range. When in reality, there's other college programs that would beg their program to have one winning season, yet alone the 18 or so in a row that Oklahoma State has had. So it goes to show how different expectations can be, and also to some extent, just I think in many ways how certain fan bases underappreciate what they already have. Because as you know too, ESPN did a really good series on Mike Gundy, particularly highlighting some of their older fan base and how he does his radio show. And I very very much enjoyed it. For anyone who's a college football fan, I'll have to put in the description and everything. But you know it's just one of those things where it's just it's you feel the Middletown energy, and you just feel like he's a man of the people. And I think that's probably the thing that you really sell yourself about Oklahoma State too, and the Cowboys and whatnot too, because I go back to their 2011 season when they had Justin Blackman and Brandon Whedon. So I guess for me there is a little bit of nostalgia there too for me in a sense, because I remember how electrifying and exciting that team was, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. And translating that into now, I mean, right now they're ranked 56th recruiting class in 2025, so they definitely still have some work to do on that front. They're 11th in the Big 12 right now in terms of recruiting class, so there definitely is some time to possibly ramp that up, assuming that those recruits continue to stay there. Although the jury's still out on that. But going back to the Arizona State game, this is their fifth game in a row that they've given up 500 yards defensively, which is just an insane stat, all things considered. Because last season, I mean, Oklahoma State was solid defensively, and we saw we saw some of the defensive wrinkles at the beginning of the season. I think I go back and think of the Arkansas game, where I think really where they kind of started to collapse was that West Virginia game too. But it's definitely pretty scary to watch, considering that there's nothing wrong with Arizona State, but Arizona State has overachieved this year. I mean, when you look at this team, I mean, Sam Levitt threw over 304 yards and 3 touchdown passes, and I would argue that his best skill set has athletic ability and running ability. He's not the type of guy that's gonna scorch you down the field necessarily, but if you give him a couple chances and you give him a decent pass protection, yeah, he can definitely make a little bit of noise. And same thing with Scadaboo of Arizona State. Power running back, really good at breaking tackles, type of guy that is just a bull. And he's a bull. He's big. He's intense, and he also combined for 274 yards, both passing and receiving too. And it's just, at this point, you just have to ask yourself, like, it's just completely inexcusable for these things to happen, especially, with what they had going into the season too. If you're Mike Gundy, I think a couple things that you're kind of asking yourself too, first and foremost is, what changes, can be made in order to, maybe not salvage this year, because obviously that's probably a wash given you only have 2 games left this year. So with that being a wash, I'm very fascinated to see what adjustments Oklahoma State goes into next season. Is Mike Gundy, because as Mike Gundy is the type of guy, he's pretty stubborn. He's wears his heart on his sleeve for good, bad, or indifferent. You can go on Wikipedia and look up some of his controversies or whatever. But all time he's 169 and 86 in his 20th season. He earns a $7.5 million. The extensions that he's kind of had throughout his career. Right now he's kind of on a 5-year contract that kind of rolls, and I believe the next contract would, I believe, be this off season, because I think the last one was in 2020. So obviously that will still be extended. But I think if you're Oklahoma State and you're a part of this Cowboy fan base, that's definitely one of the questions you have to ask yourself. I mean, are they going to make some coordinator adjustments? Or what type of players are they going to bring back? Because especially when you have that strong of a nucleus, that strong of a foundation, and that's the result you get for the year. I definitely think there's going to be some turbulence in terms of, what type of recruits that you can bring there, and perhaps even maybe having a little bit of a younger team going into next year, especially when you have a Big 12 who's only getting better. I think, but at the same time, I think BYU is going to face a similar issue, and Colorado as well. So it's definitely kind of setting up for another open sort of look in terms of the Big 12 in general. But, I talked about Alan Bowman before, and yes, he has a big arm. Yes, he can extend the field. You know, he's been serviceable as their starting quarterback. But I think another thing you have to ask yourself too, if you're Mike Gundy, you know, I get to that, your depth at quarterback is obviously not really there, because ideally, I think if you're in a situation like Mike Gundy is, I think you have to ask yourself, maybe trying to give another quarterback an attempt too. It's not like Alex Bowman has done anything to necessarily prove that he should be starting for the rest of the season. And I get, he's had a long college football career, and he's led them to some great spots, but it could be the time for him to possibly move to the side and give some younger guys an opportunity to really see what you have at the quarterback position as you go into the offseason as well. And even in Mike Gundy's tenure too, they've struggled against Oklahoma, even though they did beat them last year and everything like that. So I think that's also another rivalry that you kind of have to think about too. And at the same time, when you have a defensive line who's getting no pass rush, you're having a secondary who's getting completely scorched pretty much regardless of what's going on. So in this essence, it's a free for all. I mean, at this rate, I mean, Texas defense looks a hell of a lot better compared to these guys. They're ranked 132 out of 134 in the FBS right now in terms of defense too, and obviously too, having Ollie Gordon there, who he thought would be such a bigger weapon, has pretty much been a dud. I mean, like I said before, he's definitely kind of been a shell of himself. I think some of the offseason issues, kind of lingered on into this season and perhaps destroyed his confidence a little bit. And, when you don't have that complimentary football, as I say over and over and over again, you're going to have struggles on, all sides of the football field. So, and Ollie Gordon is so entertaining to watch too. I mean, when you see just how freak of an athlete he is, and, when he can find the right holes, he can find the right positions. It definitely is a guy that I've always enjoyed watching, and it's a shame that Oklahoma State season has been the way it is, because there's so much experience there, and Mike Gundy is an excellent football coach, and I think somebody that I think will eventually be able to turn around, but I definitely am anticipating some growing pains